All right, it's another beautiful day in Big Canoe, and it's 5 p.m.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone to the October 2020 VOA board meeting. Let me make a quick comment about Scott gave a very detailed administrative report in the work session, and today will be on finances. So Scott, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, neighbors in Big Canoe. In case you didn't notice, it's gorgeous here, and you live in a fantastically beautiful home. So take a drive around because it's really lovely. At least that's what Cindy and I did on Sunday, and it's just stunning. Gets better every day. So with that as an intro, let's keep the good news going and talking about September financial results. So Justin, you can go to the next slide for me. So we had another very strong month in September. What I'm going to go through on this slide, as we usually have been doing, is the amenity net income. And this is the variance against the revised forecast we did when I first got here in June. So Clubhouse had another strong month of 15,570 to the good versus the forecast that we built in June. Golf continues their all-year trend of another 16,000 positive. Wellness Center continues to be everything that we don't like to see, and we know why. And we know why we put the regulations in place that we've had to do at the Wellness Center. And we are looking at some other alternatives because I hate seeing that number there every single month. And we're looking at some ways that we might be able to change some of our requirements and maybe get that going in the right direction and make exercising not quite so arduous at Big Canoe. So more to come on that in the future. Racket Club did pretty well on plan. Swim beat plan. Marina again, just like golf, continues to beat their plans in September. And total net income, therefore, is 35,000 to the good in September. And year to date, the amenities are up 373,000 versus the June forecast. Next slide. So you know that I have a lot of passion around the food and beverage metrics. So this is a slide we've been using every single month. So if you look at September actuals, our cost of sales, which is basically the food that we serve, is very strong at 33%. That's where we like to see it. That is kind of honestly pretty much best in class. That's where you like to, most folks are looking to be in the high 30s, and to be at 33 is a good number. Payroll costs were up this month, and I'll talk about why in a second. Operating costs were right on plan at 18%, and the cost per sales dollar is trending right around where we want it to be, and where Bobby Jones predicted it should be way back in February at $1.14. So for every dollar we sell, we basically lose $1.14, which is not something that you're extremely happy about. But compared to the numbers that we've always run in food and beverage, it's a huge improvement. So food and beverage net income for September is a minus 18,336. However, our forecast was 34,000 loss, so we're about 16,000 above where we thought we would be to the good for food and beverage net income. So why is labor up? Kind of simple, two things. Basically, our revenue was down about $40,000 versus forecast for September. All of that was in weddings and member events. So the restaurant did just fine, basically tracked where it should. Duffers did just fine, tracked where it should. Weddings and banquets were lower than we predicted they would be way back in June. And that we still continue to struggle with some cancellations and things there, although we're having a very strong month, as I will show you in a second, in October. So while the revenue came down because of weddings and banquets, we also added 2 staff that we had been looking to hire. We knew that we needed a hostess, and that was the thing that was keeping us from really bringing back the whole curbside that everybody wanted. We needed somebody to be able to answer the phone and take the calls. So we were fortunate to find a great hostess. We added that person, and we also were very light in the kitchen since we decided not to hire the executive chef. So we were able to hire a sous chef to work with David. So those were two key positions we hired in September. And that's why you see the September revenue going up to 68. So we watch that number like a hawk, and we don't expect to see that trend continuing in October. Next slide, please. So September financial summary. This is for the entire business of Big Canoe. General operating revenue was to the good by about 19,000 versus forecast. That was driven by, drum roll please, 57 closings happened in the month of September, which is just unreal that was the second month in a row that happened. That basically gave us $14,000 of extra transfer fees that we weren't anticipating way back in June. Operating expenses were to the good in 12,921. That's kind of a good news, bad news story. It's good financially, but it's totally driven by payroll expenses. We have just had a dickens of a time fully staffing our landscape department and our public works department. So that is where we're short of people at the moment, not in food and beverage for a change. And so that is where the variance came from there. So we continue to do everything we can to try to advertise, to do employee referral bonuses, that type of thing. And Adriana was just telling me she was hiring 4 people today. So there you go. You know, it changes, the story changes by the day. So amenity net income, as I mentioned on the first slide, was to the good, 35,000. Depreciation and asset gain, that runs every month about 23,000 to the good. That doesn't change. So net income from operations at the end of September was 91,696 positive for a year-to-date number of 606,058. So we're tracking really well. October amenity revenue, just so you know again that this is not a 1-month blip on the radar. This is where we are through 10/20 of 2020, 10/20/2020. We are basically looking positive on the clubhouse for the month of October, 10% up there. Golf again continues the normal trend of being about 13% up. Wellness, just like I said on the first slide, you know, clearly off of where we want it to be through no fault of wellness. We know why that's true, and we will look into seeing what we can do again to make that a little more palatable while keeping as much safety as we possibly can in the wellness center. Racket clubs on plan, marinas crushing it again, 44% up. Total amenities therefore for the month so far is 12% above forecast. Next slide, please. This is something we look at, which is our free cash flow. It looks at how we're doing as a small business would do, looking at our free cash. So if you look way back in June, again, our forecasted net income before depreciation was about $3.65 million. Year to date, with the numbers I just took you through, we are positive 518 on that since we did the forecast. If you take away the principal payments that we know we have of about $1 million and the planned capital that we think we're going to spend by the end of this year, 1.8, that generates free cash flow in the operations side of the business of 1.336 million. That money will largely end up in our capital replacement fund that we basically will use in 2021 for the additional capital that we're planning on in the 2021 budget. Master plan, I don't think has changed anything since last month. Again, it was the 952, which comes out of the $25 a month assessments, the 72,000 for a property that the board sold many months ago over across from the North Gate, surplus operating cash that finance recommended moving at the end of last year of 1.25 million, and we're spending close to about 400,000 on master plan items this year. So we should be generating a free cash flow there, or a positive cash flow of 1.874. And again, like I said last month, that's where the money for Creek 9 renovation comes from. Next slide, please. And I'll let Amy pick it up from here on the balance sheet.
Thanks, Scott. My committee met in regular session earlier this week to review September financial results and outlook for the rest of the year. And as Scott just explained, the month was better than expected. Mostly the outdoor amenities remain at such a high usage. A good measuring stick for that is there were 3 golf days lost to rain in September and only 4 over the last 4 months. So that helped to bring year-to-date net income from operations to almost 1.5 million. This positive result is reflected in our balance sheet as well as our income statement. Overall cash increased from last month and now totals a little over $9 million. Operating cash, which funds monthly operations, including maintenance and debt service, stands at 3.3 million, up almost 400,000 from August. The board designated master plan fund now has almost 1.95 million in it. There were some minor expenditures that were made on creek and chimneys last month. The board designated capital replacement fund is almost 800,000. And this reflects depreciation year to date minus routine capital expenditures made year to date. Lastly, the restricted capital reserve, which can be used for projects in the capital reserve study under certain conditions or emergencies, continues to grow slowly and is slightly more than 2.8 million. If this were tapped, which it has not been, it would need to be replenished within 3 years. So in summary, there are 4 separate funds that handle different type of expenditures: day-to-day operations, master plan projects, replacement projects, and the restricted reserve. And in addition to this, we have access to a $3 million line of credit should we need it. Last on the slide is our debt to equity ratio is a strong 0.22, and operating cash increased slightly to 1.34 due to another good month of financial results. On the capital side of things, a third potential contractor has been identified for the Bocce project, and management expects to present this fairly soon. Indoor tennis roof and insulation fix is in a holding pattern, awaiting evaluation on the scope of work needed. We also spent 2 days last week on operating and replacement capital budgets for 2021 and hope to wrap that up next week with recommendation to the board for approval. My final item, at last week's work session, Chief Ricky Jordan presented the spec and bid process for the new fire engine provisionally approved last year in the 2020 capital budget and was given the green light to proceed earlier this year. The process resulted in 6 proposals in which the top 2 came within 4 out of about 980 points of each other, and they also happened to be the 2 lowest bids. John Kaufman from our finance committee was involved in the process since last fall, including final bid review and grading. I want to give John the credit he's due for all the time and effort he contributed over the past year. It was truly valuable to management and the community. Thank you, John. Management has now presented 5 financing scenarios for consideration. A performance bond should be posted costing about $1,400 for each of them due to the length of time to delivery and amount of dollars involved. 3 of the 5 options were straightforward lending options, of which 2 included about a $17,000 discount for upfront payment in full by a lender for a total cost of $542,838, including sales tax. The 4th option is just a straight cash purchase where you also get the discount. And the 5th option is a hybrid solution where the engine is fully paid by the POA upfront, getting the discount, but can be financed at any time within the first 12 months after order under new equipment terms, which are more favorable. The investment opportunity cost to obtain that discount amounts to less than $400 if we ultimately decided to finance it at delivery at about 8 months. But we get to retain that option should we conclude it to be advantageous. Just as an aside, the engine was approved as a 5-year financing arrangement in the 2020 capital budget as part of a potential long-term strategy of renewing the entire fleet over 30 years. However, after considering our current cash position, outlook for the remainder of the year, and comparing rates and other terms, the committee voted unanimously to recommend option 5, the hybrid with the discount at proceed with the cash purchase of a new Pierce custom fire engine from 10-8 Fire Equipment Company for $542,837.75, plus the performance fund to be posted paid from our capital replacement fund. That concludes my report for the month, and I believe you all are going to perhaps go to a vote.
Bob, you need to turn your mic on.
Bob's on mute.
Oh, pardon me. It works better if I'm not muted, I guess. Before I call for a vote, could we ask anybody on the board that has any questions or comments on Scott's report or Amy's, other than the fire truck? Do they have any comments or questions?
Well, I think we're doing really well moving forward with our approach to the financial budget. I think the decision on the fire truck is pretty straightforward. We didn't have all these options when we looked at it last year, but clearly we know that our experience in going after used fire trucks and other used vehicles is not a good solution.
My other question too was, as Wayne mentioned, with our history and performance with these used vehicles, has anyone discussed the disposal of the ones that are replaced or the ones that are no longer functional?
What they're going to do is rotate. They're going to put the current truck that serves as the front line into reserve status. And I believe, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, that's going to go over into Station 5.
Right, correct.
As a reserve status. So that's not going to be retired.
But you
What
have a
is
couple
gonna
that
be
aren't
retired-
operational, right?
I'm sorry?
Aren't there two or aren't there some in the fleet that aren't currently operating?
Yeah, Lou, they're actually looking at selling them for parts, believe it or not. They were pretty darn old when we got them, and our mountain roads aren't real kind to fire trucks, and there isn't another station that would take them at this point. So it's parts, and we will look for selling them.
Right. And even when we did when we had the presentation back in February, I don't know who all was there, there was already a plan to retire several of those.
Yep.
I talked to the fire chief at Tate. They just bought 3 brand new ones, and his position was going new is far more useful in the long run than trying to correct it through the years with all the things that are going to go wrong. Most people that give up old trucks give them up for a reason, and it may be parts.
Right. And that was part of the study, that public safety did, and the volunteers went out and canvassed other fire departments to see if
That study and that plan that was done in February was very comprehensive, very well thought out,
Yeah.
as was the whole process for soliciting bids that Chief Jordan presented in the work session last week. If anybody wants to look at the details of how that worked, it was very impressive. Would somebody like to make a motion to accept the Finance Committee's recommendation for option 5 of financing?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, are there any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, everybody that's been involved with that. Very well done. We'll move on next to the sales report. Phil?
Thank you, Bob. Well, we have more good news, as Scott alludes to. Real estate activity in Big Canoe is hyperactive, incredibly busy. It's definitely a seller's market. It's very hot, quick sales. As of today, we have 29 listings, not 30, 29. It includes 1 condominium, prices from $199,000 for a condo up to $1,499,000 for the top price listing. Listings are down from 31 in September. We had 53 back in August, 78 in July, 104 in June, and 123 in May, if you can start to see the trend. A normal for Big Canoe is about 10% of the community, So out of roughly 2,800 homes, we'd normally have around 280 homes on the market this time of year. At 29, it's a tough market. 125 lots are listed in Big Canoe for sale. That's down a bit from 127 in September, 132 in August, 140 in July. So a similar trend with lots priced at 3,000 on the low end up to a high for a lake lot that's at 399.9. 32 lots closed in the last 12 months. 15 homes are under contract now in Big Canoe. 214 homes closed in the last 6 months. And as Scott just said, 321 homes have closed in the last 12 months. So it's an amazing marketplace. Around 20 new homes are typically under construction. That continues to be true. Average construction cost we're seeing has been rising. That's gone up from around $150 a foot up to $175 a square foot, according to our builders. And an average home now being built in the 3,000 to 3,500 square foot range, which is our average, is running in the $600,000 to $650,000 range. Prices are up in the 10 to 15% in the normal price range, again with an average home running around $600,000 to $650,000. 20% nationally is the price increase overall. So homes continue to be brisk. We need more inventory, and it's amazing to see the number of folks that are looking to come here from the metro Atlanta area and from other places to be in a safe, secure, beautiful environment that we offer. So we'll continue to sell all the homes we can get our hands on.
Hey, Phil, Wayne, how many of these lots would you categorize as we can build on?
You know, Wayne, probably over half of them. If you consider the builders' lots, the developers' lots, about 77 of the developers' lots available. But those lots are not in this total of 125 listed for sale. So really, if you add those, there's 200 lots. Mostly over half are good buildable lots. You know, you're not going to have the oh wow views. Anything on the lake or with a mountain view is typically in the 150 to 200,000 range.
So what's the average price? I was asked this question the other day.
Yeah.
If I was in Atlanta and I was looking at maybe not the best view, but a really nice lot, what kind of pricing are we looking at?
Pretty good rule of thumb is 75 to about 125 for a normal lot.
Okay.
And if you got view, you can add 50 to 100,000. So you're easily up to 150 to 200 for lot view. And if you were lucky enough to find a lot on the lake or on any of the lakes or ponds, those typically are 300, 400 and up.
Thanks, Phil.
You bet.
Any other questions of Phil?
I just had one comment for Phil too. I was contacted by the county manager over in Dawson County, and he was looking to schedule a visit to a Big Canoe. He had some guests coming in. And
Yeah.
they wanted to see Big Canoe properties. And I said, you know, I'm thinking about you. If he finalizes a date and schedule, I said, I know just the guy who can do it. But once again, we've got interest from outside the community that want to check out Big Canoe.
Well, we have great agents, and Big Canoe is fortunate to have the quality of agents we have in the community and with many companies. So the market's busy, and we're all working together to make it happen.
They're interested in Dawson County.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the good news, Phil. In this, my penultimate monthly board meeting as board president, I've done a lousy job of managing the agenda because I'm the speaker on most of these topics. I don't know how that happened, but somehow it did. We'll try to go through and cover at least 90% of the topics that are on the agenda. Maybe we'll hit 100 today. First one on here after the fire truck financing vote, which we already covered, is electronic voting. Everyone's aware that last month we conducted a vote on the Creek 9 rejuvenation initiative. We've got another vote scheduled, and everybody's aware of that, I think, for directors. And there's another vote on the capital contribution fee that might come up shortly, and Candy's going to talk about that later on in the agenda. But in an effort to reduce costs for votes, we investigated the legality of the 21st century, we're now 20% into, electronic voting. And it is legal under Georgia code and our bylaws with a caveat. Of course, our bylaws have a caveat, and that is we need to mail the ballots. Well, we could change those easily, couldn't we? And then we could have an electronic vote, except it takes 2 readings and so about 3 months to change that. So anyway, it is possible. We had a work group that studied multiple vendors and found 2 who look promising, and there are potential cost savings if we can eliminate, particularly if we can eliminate the mailing part of it, which we're going to talk about in the next agenda item on the governance documents. A detailed analysis now needs to be done, and this is one of those times when we pass this initiative that the board thought of, Regis thought of as a cost savings idea, pass it on to operations to finalize, get the details, work with our auditors, work with our attorney, and find the details of this so we can start using electronic voting potentially in 2021. Scott, do you have any comments on where we go from here?
Bob Mackey set up, the chair of our elections committee, set up a sub-team. Tim Moran was part of that team from our side, a few other talented folks from audit and from the finance committee and things like that. They looked at 6 different potential companies that could handle electronic voting for us. And after some reference checks and calls and discussions with these companies, they have it narrowed down to 2 people. And both of them are pretty cost competitive and do this for a living. So the good news is we're in the home stretch from an operation point of view. The bad news, as Bob said, it doesn't really save us any money until we change the bylaws so that we don't need to send out a hard copy notice, ballot, and proxy, which is what we currently have to do. So we still have all the mailing costs, all the printing costs. We save a little bit on the auditing side with the CPA firm, but we're going to kind of keep getting ready from an operations side, but we really need the board to look at that bylaw and decide if you all want to change that.
Ball back.
Bob, do you think we can do that this year? I mean, there doesn't seem to be any reason why we can't examine it closely just to save money for the community.
Yeah, that brings us up to the next topic of changing those governing documents and the bylaws. And
Bob,
Yeah.
before we move on, I'd like to make a somewhat of a correction to what you said. You had given me credit for this idea, and I certainly appreciate that, but it was actually Jane Hagan, our Chief Financial Officer, who had suggested it, and she and I had talked about it. I just gave it a little shove, but it was Jane's idea. So under the heading of giving credit where credit is due, that goes to Jane. And so it's come full circle. It came from operations and it's back to operations now.
well, Regis, thanks for being the conduit. And it came from obviously a very appropriate place, our CFO looking to manage costs. Appreciate it. So we'll move on to the next governing documents, which we're just kind of into, Wayne, and give you an update on where that is. Our documents are old and tired and a bowl of spaghetti. They're sorely in need of updating. Our POA attorney is going to provide a straw man for some more modern looking bylaws. And she is going to have that to us very shortly. We have also, and Wayne has taken the initiative of this, starting to get a group of property owners chartered to tailor these to our requirements. So we'll start the governing documents with a review of the bylaws. Hopefully we'll get that done just as quickly as possible this year. after we get the bylaws done, we've also got rules and regulations and policies and procedures that are in dire need of change. As I mentioned, we have some shackles, like we would like to be doing electronic voting, but we can't do it because our bylaws say we can't. We have to mail it, and we can't change our bylaws without 2 readings in an extensive amount of time. It would be nice if we could change those today and start electronic voting for the directors, but that's not to be. So the next step after the bylaw revision, we, the board, have seen several things that are in need of change. Our attorney has her list of things that need to change. She's going to be providing those to us in the next 30 or 60 days. And we will hope that this work group would then move on to that. Finally, our governing document, other than our articles of incorporation, which are what they are the covenants. And the covenants require developer approval. So they're going to be addressed at a later date. So it's going to be a kind of a 3-phase project. Questions?
Good summary.
Okay. Okay, we got done with that one. I'll look at the thing, and the next one on the agenda is Dawson County SPLOST 7. I guess that's me again, isn't it? I'll introduce this, but then we're going to introduce, and we'll have somebody else present the details with Joe Thompson. Dawson County is currently in the process of prioritizing the projects that will be funded by the SPLOST 7 revenues. SPLOST has been an important revenue source for the county for some time. It's largely funded by sales on the 400 corridor from non-residents. We've got a long shot opportunity. This is by no means a certainty. There are a lot of projects competing with it, but to address the commission for the specifications for an activity center included in the west part of the county. It would be accessible to all of the public. So Dawson and Pickens County residents of Big Canoe would all be served. There is land available on Hubbard Road, and the county would have to assess if that's the best location, if they're going to go forward with it. Ken Nichols led a work effort to define the needs, and the group included Rhonda Stark, Jim Braley, and Joe Thompson. This was an ad hoc group that we put together just for one purpose, is to define these specifications so we could talk in more detail to the county. Lou and myself did meet with Billy Thurman and Sharon Fawcett, and they were receptive, and they asked us to do this work. And Joe is going to talk about this work now, so I'll turn it over to Joe.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I'm going to be displaying a series of slides on PowerPoint that's going to be in 2 sections. The first is a list of those desired spaces that was put together by some advocates of a community center over the last 2 or 3 years. That's going to include what they must have, what they'd like to have, and perhaps some things that they studied or researched and they decided not to go forward with that. The second part of my presentation is going to be in the form of a space program where I actually take these spaces and create square footage and square foot totals and so on. So the must-haves, I'm not going to read this all to you, but it's a large space with seating capacity for upwards of 500 people. It's going to be in a gymnasium that'll be used for multi-purposes, and I'll explain that later. Either a permanent stage or a portable stage, 3 small meeting rooms, and 2 large meeting rooms, the small rooms for 25 and big rooms for 50. It's got to have excellent Wi-Fi, TV, AV projection systems, and storage for all this sort of things. Adequate restrooms for not only the people attending the meeting spaces, but also for any athletic locker rooms and so on. And then a lot of places to store things. Next slide, please. And then the nice to haves, a kitchen, or could be maybe a cooking area, or it could be just a warming area for the meetings and so on. Library space that could be used for multi-purposes. And then a big question of, will food and alcohol be able to be brought in? Next. And then Dawson County certainly had some suggestions of what they would like to use this space for the polling, police, fire station, substation, host senior programs, youth programs, outdoor recreational facilities, and so on. Next, please. And the things that were talked about but not further considered would be an indoor walking track and an indoor tennis. These didn't feel like these were necessary. So the next part of my presentation is actually taking those ideas and calculating through research what the square footage required for these. So, obviously, if you've been to the Pickens County Community Center, you could be fairly familiar with what these buildings look like. They're fairly simple buildings. With the lobby, reception area, office, for the management of the facility, vending area, and then 3 meeting rooms. Each room would seat about 25 people in a sort of teaching or conferencing sort of layout. Large meeting room would seat there'd be 2 of those, seat about 50 people each, and then total facilities for those meeting areas. And then the large space in the building, which takes up nearly half the building, would be a gymnasium. It would be sized for a high school sized basketball court and 2 cross courts that you often see in gymnasiums. We'd have bleachers of about 5 rows on each side that would fold up against the wall. Then when the bleachers are up and against the wall, there'd be room for 4 pickleball courts that could be set up on that court. And then this big space, if you bring out the portable gym or have a permanent gym, would seat in excess of 500 people. Next. And then some of the support areas, projection room, equipment storage, chair storage, and then the kitchen and prep area, about 600 square feet with some food storage. There's the library that we talked about. And I think the best thing to do would be to have separate toilet areas for the gymnasium as you would for the meeting space. So there'd be a combination of toilets, lockers, and showers. Next, please. That would accompany the gymnasium. And then some necessary support areas like a janitor room, electric room, and then a communications closet. So the total net square feet of 18,000 square feet, that's it totaling all the rooms from inside corner to inside corner. And then to that, you add a grossing factor, which is common in the building industry, of about 40%, which includes quarters, wall thicknesses, mechanical spaces, and that would bring the total square footage of this building up to about 25,500. Now the gymnasium is nearly half the building, and it doesn't have a lot of quarters in it. So I would think that your 40% factor is probably very adequate, and a safe number would be 25,000 or less for a building of this size. We have not yet calculated parking. That if this program goes forward, a professional architect would have to be hired, who would apply codes, would have to double check the space program and put some real numbers to it. And of course, the activities that this building could be used for, besides what Dawson County wants, all our clubs, and I mentioned here 100+ clubs have been studied and researched in the last year. There's actually about 140 clubs, and that doesn't include all of the book clubs, but card groups, craft groups, indoor sports, acoustic showcase, terrace type events, educational activities, great decisions, adult learning classes, guest speakers, wellness presentations, and of course, POA meetings. So a list of the clubs have been turned over to each of the board members, and it wasn't an effective list to put on the slideshow, but there's plenty of clubs that could probably use some of these spaces. Questions?
Does the board have any questions of Joe?
Yeah, two questions, Joe, that we ran into earlier. One is the sewage. We looked real hard at the north gate, just as a inside the gate thing, and there's no real sewage capability for a community center there unless, and I spoke with Ron Metters from the water company. That was a significant factor in cost, and it also impacted Marble Hill. The other thing is, when you build a facility like this, typically you're also required to set it up as an emergency center with backup generators and other things. So I just mentioned that, water and other things that, and to have a lower level in it, particularly that allows you to be protected against tornadoes and hurricanes and those kind of things. So I just passed that along because we did some research into it. Certainly Dawson County is in a better position, I think, than Pickens. And Pickens already is committed significantly to their community center in Jasper, and frankly has less population in the not unincorporated Pickens County. So that's been one of our challenges. But
Wayne,
thanks for.
something else we have to think about is Hubbard Road is only paved up to the fire station.
Yeah.
So if you go past that, you got paving. But also, if the large landowner out there that has some interest in selling this tract, there's going to have to be sewer capacity added, and that helps his value of the additional property he would have adjacent to our potential property. So all of that be considered by Dawson County as their expense and part of the SPLOST, as opposed to Big Canoe and or the POA's funds.
No, that's great. I mean, I just wanted to remind everybody that's one of the challenges we've had is we've looked at where to put facilities, and not only here, but in both counties.
Right.
Okay, well noted.
Joe, has this been presented to the Dawson County officials yet?
Bob, you may want to answer
I
that.
can answer that, Joe. Lou is trying to arrange a first meeting, another meeting with Billy and Sharon for them to review it prior to us presenting it to the entire commission. And we're just having trouble getting their schedules together. We were trying to do that for next week, and we'd ask Joe or somebody from that subgroup to attend with us if we could, and we'll schedule that. So it's a two-phase thing. Again, we would present to Billy and Sharon. If they give the go-ahead, we present to the entire commission. This is not a slam dunk by any means. We did have a building like this in SPLOST 5 10 years ago, and the economy went south and there wasn't enough funding to get it in its list of priorities. We, in our first meeting, I was pleasantly surprised that they didn't say, no, we're done. Because they've got a lot of projects competing for it, but they said that this would be a definite possibility. And so that's why we have the group, and that's why the work is done. And now that we have this, now we can present this to Dawson County.
Yeah, Bob's right. They were very receptive, and they also, I thought, were kind of proactive because they said if as Joe's worked on this, if we would come up with the basic concepts and things, they could review it and give us a little bit of guidance before, as Bob mentioned, the presentation to the board.
Yeah, they had kind of two concerns. One was what was going to be the use of the building and how many people would be using it. The list that we have of the 120 to 140 clubs and committees, that to me is the biggest benefit to Big Canoe right now. I got here almost 20 years ago, and there was a talk of a community center had been going on before that. Talk of a community center still goes on. This is a way to get a poor man's version for Big Canoe, close to our gate, hopefully, and at no cost to Big Canoe other than what we pay in SPLOST, and we'd pay that in SPLOST and it would be used for something other than ours. We believe that one of the interests they have is that we're a big community, a big part of Dawson County, and their T-SPLOST package did not pass, and they're concerned that this will not be passing SPLOST 7 wouldn't be as easy as the other 6 have been. And they need SPLOST desperately. So if we can say that we are behind this and we will have a campaign to bring out the vote, I think that's going to help us a lot.
When does that vote happen?
No,
This time
November.
around?
I think it's November. I think
This year? This time?
next year. Next year.
No, I don't think it's till next year, Bob.
21, okay.
Yeah, it's next year. It is not this year.
Okay.
November, I think, is when they're finalizing the package.
Right.
Okay.
The other thing, Phil, we've had a lot of homeowners buy, and I understand we've significantly increased the number of dependent children in the population. That can play a factor in how we provide facilities for that group. So we ought to probably look into that a little bit more and see if that makes any difference.
Yeah, we're seeing more families coming in with young children. So they're looking for that safety and serenity. So you're right, Wayne. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Joe, thank you very much for the work that you've done now, and we'll be calling you again to see if you can help.
Thanks, Joe.
Commissioner.
Fine.
Capital Contribution Fund vote. Okay, the Capital Contribution Fund is an important initiative, very important, that'll balance funding for capital projects between assessments to property owners, as are currently being done, and the capital contribution fee that would pertain to new owners who will participate in the benefits of living in Big Canoe. There was an opportunity to pass a capital contribution fee more than a decade ago that narrowly failed in a difficult housing environment. If it had passed, the CCF could have funded, with no assessment dollars being used, the new fire station, a fire truck, the entire Creek 9 rejuvenation, a typical year's road maintenance, tennis courts renovations, the new pickleball courts, new pontoon boats, and more. Candy's going to present the details of the capital contribution fee.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I'd like to begin by giving a very special thanks to Dick Hamill. As many you may know, he's been a longtime resident of Big Canoe and contributed to the community in a number of ways over the years. He led the marketing and communications for Home Depot for a number of years as well. And Big Canoe has been the beneficiary of his knowledge and enthusiasm on a number of our initiatives. Dick led our communications group, which included Bob Crouch, Scott Auer, Mark DeLavina, and myself, in putting together a series of exercises to help us evaluate a CCF communications plan and the most logical way to present to our community. So the pertinent information regarding the state of Big Canoe could be made by informed decisions through our communications plan over the next month. Next slide. I know we've talked about this over the last month, but I wanted to summarize the high points. Why a contribution fund? First and foremost, it's for the benefit of all homeowners in Big Canoe to support future capital needs in our master plan. Big Canoe's fee proposal is supported by a one-time $2,500 fee assessed to all new owners at the closing of their home purchase. It's a fair way to not only maintain the 48-year-old infrastructure of our community, but to fund enhancements that perpetuate Big Canoe's standing as a preeminent mountain community. It's a fair way to balance the costs that have been borne by current owners through the years with new owners, and over time to reduce the need for monthly assessment increases. In 2018, the Finance Committee perform due diligence on did a fee make sense, and how did we compare to other similar communities? And they looked at 12 to 15 communities in the Southeast and found that similar charges, such as just becoming a property owner or paying initiation fees to have access to amenities, ran anywhere from $8,000 to $45,000. The contribution fee puts no additional financial burden on current homeowners, while enabling new owners to participate in and enjoy all that Big Canoe has to offer. We are going to vote shortly, but first I would like to outline or highlight what events, what media and so forth will be coming forth with the positive board vote to the community over the next month. The community vote is pegged for the December, and the results announced on December 30th. As you can see, it begins tonight with hopefully a positive board vote, and then media coverage starts next week and runs through December. There'll be distributions of printed, posted, and digital materials on the fund, posted in the clubhouse, the post office, all of our amenities. We're also launching a capital contribution website, which will hopefully go live on November 2nd. And then we'll hold a virtual hall meeting with a Q&A. And this is to be confirmed, but our tentative dates are November 17th, and the ballots mailed out the last week in November, and the voting period running from the 2nd of December to the 29th. Any questions you all may have?
Yeah, this is something that we've been talking about since March. This board has been, and prior boards have been talking about before that. And as I said, was voted on more than a decade ago. Does somebody want to make a motion to proceed with the schedule as outlined by Candy?
I make the motion, Bob.
Thank you, Wayne. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Regis. Any other conversation?
No, I think we've talked about this quite a bit. It's time for action.
I think we've talked about it. I think we've communicated it. I think much of the community is aware of it. And now that there's an actual vote in place, they'll become more aware and more involved, and spot on. Good for that. So no other conversation. All in favor?
Such a positive time as the community is experiencing with real estate and sales. This is a great time to capture those additional dollars and help us with our reserve funds and for all the upcoming cost of maintaining our 48-year community.
I agree, and it's just reflective that we're stepping up to the responsibility and answering the call.
Absolutely. It's a fair way to apportion the cost of the required capital projects that are going to be coming up in the future.
Absolutely.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Candy. If I can introduce the last item, I will have gotten through the entire agenda, which is amazing this time. As I introduce, my only introduction is Joe Thompson is an excellent example of what we're looking at here. We have in Big Canoe professionals of all types of background, from water, forestry management, architects such as Joe, and we're looking for those people that are interested in doing what Joe just did, helping the POA out. So Lou, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you, Bob. It's just vitally important, I believe, to have these professional resources available to council for our community projects that as a board we look at and deal with, and also what Scott will face and confront and manage. And aside from the slideshow that I recently presented, there's been, I would say from this meeting, you can tell a handful of issues, recent issues that have demanded a whole lot more time from some of the experts that I've been talking to. Just as Amy had mentioned with the master plan status, the professional registry kind of has been we've been developing some things behind the scenes, but not a whole lot has changed. I appreciate Justin's work with me. We're moving along with the IT program and getting that trimmed down. And really, I think a great tool for the residents to be able to use. And just as was mentioned by Candace, I did have a very enlightening meeting with Dick Hamill this week, and his expertise and information was just a very positive experience. And that's why I'm hoping that when we get the website, the enrollment thing, all of that machinery engaged, and then we'll get this announced, I have no doubt that the resources that we can pull from this community will get us miles down the road with expertise and save us a lot of money and a lot of stress. So we're moving forward, and I'll hope to have some more visuals and updates in the near future.
Thanks, Lou. When do we expect to invite property owners to submit their desires and their skills?
Well, what we're doing, and as I said, Justin has laid out, we're just designing a more sleek and easily, completed registration. And also what we've decided, Justin's agreed with me, and just to keep the community informed, we're also going to have listed the current long-range planning projects, as well as some of the determinations made by Scott as far as, current community projects, so they can look and see what we're interested in finding expertise on. And if they simply want to, offer their volunteer service towards those projects, or simply put their information in the bank so that we can resource it as needed, then I'm thinking this will probably be done before Christmas. I'm hoping probably by November. Justin may have something to fill in on that, but they're moving forward and making a lot of progress.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions of Lou or comments? If not, we'll go through that routine of having a motion to adjourn the meeting, and turn it over for property owner questions. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Is there any conversation? No, we're going to finish this before 6 o'clock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Justin, we'll look for you to see if there's some questions from property owners tonight.
We actually have no questions currently.
Whoa, that means there's no way
Unbelievable.
to cover it so well.
Bob,
sure
you paid some
everything is
people
working
off,
correct?
did you?
What's that, Wayne?
You paid some people off not to ask questions tonight?
Just 3 or 4.
I can think of who they might be, Bob.
I have a pretty good idea that you have the same idea I do. Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks to the property owners. And I hope it's a statement that we have covered adequately what was on the agenda tonight. Thank you again, Joe. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Jeff.